and welcome everyone. I'm SAG-AFTRA Executive Vice President, Ben Whitehair. Thank you all so much for joining us for another SAG-AFTRA program on YouTube. To stay current with all of our video events, we invite you to subscribe to this channel, which you can even do right now. On today's PTEOE, President's Task Force on Education, Outreach, and Engagement live stream, we present a panel discussion organized by SAG-AFTRA that took place at the American Film Market, or AFM, this past November. The panel was titled Setting New Standards for Hair and Makeup Equity and was moderated by our very own Duncan Crabtree Ireland. It is an incredibly important discussion, so let's go ahead and dive right in.
Welcome to Setting New Standards for Hair and Makeup Equality, presented by SAG-AFTRA. And my name is Robin Burt. I'm the VP of Marketing for the Independent Film and Television Alliance. So progress is being made in the fight for on-set hair and makeup equality. However, there's still plenty of work ahead. Black actors still find themselves shouldering the emotional, physical, and financial burden when qualified hair and makeup professionals are not made available to them. The good news, groups like SAG-AFTRA, Hair and Makeup Equality Work Group, and Black Beauty Roster are charging ahead to create change and help build a pipeline of diverse talent. Okay. It's now my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Duncan Crabtree Ireland, great name by the way, who is the National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator for SAG-AFTRA. In his capacity, he oversees the world's largest and most influential entertainment union, comprised of more than 160,000 members worldwide who work in film, TV, in broadcast news, commercials, music, video games. Please give a warm welcome to Duncan.
Hello. Hello, hello. Oh, great. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for that intro, and hello and welcome to everybody. I'm Duncan Crabtree Ireland, as was just said, SAG-AFTRA's National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator, and I'm really thrilled to have everyone here today for this amazing panel, and it's an extremely important and timely discussion about setting a new standard in hair and makeup equity in the entertainment industry. Before I introduce our amazing panelists and launch into the discussion, I do want to take just a few moments to talk about SAG-AFTRA's work in this field. Specifically, let me first start by stating what SAG-AFTRA's position is. We believe that not providing equitable hair and makeup is a discriminatory practice, that it's unlawful, and that it's just plain wrong. Our member-led hair and makeup equity work group has guided the development of a comprehensive strategic plan to advance hair and makeup equity in the workplace. This includes raising awareness in industry forums such as this one, and amplifying our members' experiences as well. We also are working with our sister unions and other organizations to help create systemic change, such as building a pipeline of diverse talent in all areas. And our members sent letters to Congress urging passage of the Federal Crown Act. Even though that Crown Act only applies to federally funded institutions, we're supporting it because it's the right thing to do. And it also sends a strong message that we will not tolerate unequal treatment of our members in the hair and makeup trailer or anywhere else they obtain work. Recently, we were able to secure hair and makeup equity provisions in our new commercials contract just earlier this year, but we know there's a lot more work to be done, and that it is a priority for our leadership. So without any further ado, let me introduce our speakers for today on the panel. They are professionals who are working on the front lines of this issue, helping to make lasting change to benefit people today and for generations to come. First of all, to my immediate left is Michaela Angela Davis. She is a writer, producer, and image activist focusing on gender, race, fashion, culture, beauty, and identity. She's the creator and executive producer of the 6-part docu-series The Hair Tales, now on OWN and Hulu. The program is a dynamic celebration of Black women's identity, beauty, culture, and humanity expressed through the stories in their hair. She's held editor-in-chief and fashion, beauty, and culture editor positions at national publications and is a celebrated fashion stylist who has worked with icons like Diana Ross, Beyonce, Prince, Maya Angelou, and countless others. And prior to bringing Hair Tales to life, she worked, they need to know. They need to know. She collaborated with Mariah Carey on her #1 New York Times bestselling memoir, The Meaning of Mariah Carey, and most recently they collaborated again on a new book, Christmas Princess, which I understand is out now because it's after Halloween. Thank you so much for being here, Michaela. To Michaela's immediate left is Maud Okra. Maud is an entrepreneur who is passionate about bringing solutions to underserved minority markets. She is co-founder and the CEO of Black Beauty Roster, a digital DEI platform that connects the TV, film, and editorial world with hairstylists and makeup artists that are trained in textured hair and darker complexions. Black Beauty Roster has worked with industry-leading companies like Warner Brothers Discovery, Walt Disney, and L'Oreal to bring more equity and opportunity to the beauty industry. And Maud has also received the Women's Ceiling Crashers Award from AT&T, has been appointed to the DC Commission on Fashion Arts and Beauty, and is a member of the Textured Hair Coalition. Thanks for being here, Maud. And to Maud's immediate left is Yvette Urbina. Her focus is on identifying diverse talent opportunities across the enterprise, maintaining centralized resources, and providing content creators greater tools and ability to access new and established diverse voices. She has a producing background and was a driving force behind iconic shows, including The OC, That 70s Show, and King of the Hill, as well as Emmy award-winning live-action Nickelodeon comedy, Nicky, Ricky, Dickie, and Dawn. And she also serves on the board of Los Angeles Team Mentoring, an organization that guides middle school students growing up in challenging urban environments, and was honored in 2022 with an Imagen Latino en Media Award, and very recently by the organization MANA with an En Fuego Award. So congratulations for that, and thank you for being aquí and en fuego, Yvette. Thank you so much. So obviously we have an amazingly talented and expert panel here, and so I want to take full advantage of that and leap right into some questions, if that's okay. And my first question is for you, Michaela. In your career, I'm sure you've seen it all, behind the camera, in front of the camera, printed page. Can you set the stage for the audience today on some of the image issues that Black actors face in the entertainment industry?
Yeah. First, thank you for having us. It's been a journey, and so to start having this conversation in community of industry folks is important and something that I had hoped to get to. Duncan, if you don't mind me being a disruptor,
love it.
and
Go for
not
it.
answering your question,
That's totally fine.
and asking you to share what you shared with us in the green room about your identity and your family and your connection to this topic, because it's really important, because also people like Maud and I are always talking, right, about, Black women, Black people have always been, we're the ones out here talking all the time about the issue and moving it forward. And often what we don't see are our allies. We don't see the global and human connectivity to issues that may center in Black women's identity, but also have an extension out into our communities, out into our worlds. Like on site, I would have no idea that you would connect to this content in a very specific way. And I'm gonna get you some of them books for your daughters.
Thank you.
The Christmas Princess, because she has a complex identity. So my question for you, Duncan, is can you just share what you shared with us?
Sure, of course. So in what Michaela's referring to is in preparation for this panel today, we had a conversation, and I happened to share that I happen to have 5 adopted children who are Black, and 3 of them are daughters. And I was sharing the fact that when my husband and I more than 17 years ago adopted our oldest, we didn't really understand the hair issues in terms of really both the cultural significance of it, but also just how qualified you need to be able to do African American hair properly, black hair properly. And so we just had this idea that we were going to learn how to do it, and we were going to do it. And yes, it was quite naive. But what we rapidly learned was, you really do have to know what you're doing. It's not like, if I were to, you can't take a Flowbee to my head, that's fine. I mean, but you can't do that with African American hair. And for my daughter, it's really important to her identity and her self-esteem that her hair be taken seriously and be handled correctly. Yes. And so we learned that lesson, and our younger daughters have benefited from that because we didn't have to learn it again. And I'm here to just say, as somebody who had no malicious intent, but who was just ignorant about this before I had that personal experience, I certainly would love to help be part of helping people learn about why that is true, and that that is something that you may not know, but that it is really important to understand that, especially if you're going to be working in this industry, if you're going to be making decisions about how hair and makeup is handled for performers of color. It is essential that you inform yourself.
So you're a metaphor for the industry, for why having a more global understanding benefits everyone, because that's the point. And also that storytelling is how we heal. Storytelling is how humans record their humanity. So your story is important to this conversation because it's the stories that connect us, so we can understand each other better, and we understand your daughter. The hair is a metaphor for Black women's identity and the way they move through the world, and the complexity and the amount of misunderstanding, misinformation, and ignorance around them, right? And so when you look at it through the lens of the episode that was released, so 2 episodes have been released today on Hulu. One is Freedom's Air, and it centers on Marseille Martin. And we talk about this specifically and directly, what it was like for her and Tracy to have a hair stylist or designer that really understood them, their characters, their complexities, their growth through the series, and what the absence of that is like. And that is what most people experience, is the absence of someone who understands the needs of their hair and how their hair connects to their character, how their character connects to their story, to the entire production, and how you feel when you know that your hair isn't cared for. It is a metaphor that you are not cared for, that you are not considered, even if you're a big star like Tracy or Marseille. And when she talks about now being in the position to create her own hair departments, it's inspiring, but that there's a lot of blocks in that journey. And so when you watch this episode, it's really serendipitous that we're having this conversation today, because this is the episode that takes that on. And just, I was telling Maude that one of the inspirations of creating this show was our history of generations and tens of thousands of Black women who have stood on their feet with their hands in our heads, getting us ready to be dignified at church, at school, paying our way to college, holding communities down. Black hair salons are bedrocks in communities. They are gathering places, they are organizing spaces, they are safe spaces, and they are sites of enormous talent. All over the country, every neighborhood, on every Martin Luther King Boulevard, there's a salon with someone that can do some hair. So my hope for this is that they see themselves in the show, that they know that workers matter, beauty workers matter, hair workers have funded the civil rights movement, right? So I'm hoping that there's a relationship between, those workers on the ground and getting into these trailers. And Maude, it was so funny because I was like, I know there's a black woman somewhere working on this solution. And then like 2 days later, I find out about you, so, yeah.
Thank you so much, Michaela. Maude, I'd like to turn to you if I could and just ask you, what is Black Beauty Roster and what inspired you to found it?
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you so much, Duncan, for having me. So Black Beauty Roster is a digital D&I platform that connects TV and film industry to hairstylists and makeup artists that are trained actually in all textures and complexions, but with specific focus on textured hair and darker complexions, as well as also education for the industry at large. And what prompted us was really our why. Right, so I'm sure a number of us have seen the different articles of actors, models, expressing their frustration with their hair and makeup experiences on set. Sharing stories in which they have to bring their own makeup or hair products, right, into their trailers, that they have to wake up early and get their hair done offset because of different, union regulations that won't allow them to have a hairstylist of their choice. We've heard the stories of having their hair damaged and ripped out because the hairstylist didn't know how to work with their textured hair, literally crying in their trailers, right? And we kept saying, oh, someone's got to do something about it. And there was a lot of conversation about the problem. Right? And then on the other side, we were fortunate enough to be able to speak with a number of hairstylists and makeup artists that were saying, I know I can do this, but I don't have the network, I don't have the access. As we know sometimes in the TV and film production industry, it's very much a who's who you know, and being able to get your foot in the door. And on the other side, when we were talking with brands and companies, they said, we want to do the right thing. We're just not sure what to do. We're trying to figure this out. And what we recognized was, especially in this time, it was a moment for the world that became the racial reckoning, right? With, unfortunately, the murder of George Floyd, that really caused everyone to pause and kind of take a deep breath and say, what more can I do to help not only diversity and inclusion, but equity? What does my role look like? And I remember we kept saying, someone has to do something, someone has to do something. And all of a sudden we were like, all right, I guess that someone's gonna be us, right? And we really rolled up our sleeves and picked it up and said that it's important to have the conversation, but you need to have solutions. And what we recognized was, hey, we didn't make this mess. This is not on us, right? But the reality is that we have to bring the solution forward. If someone else is not going to do it for us, we have to do it. And that really became the catalyst and birth for Black Beauty Roster.
We were their first big studio partner, and I, I would say that I started on the DEI team there about 2 years ago. So it was sort of coming out of a lot of listening sessions that the company had been doing, speaking about the racial reckoning, and I would say I had a lot of similar experiences being a creative executive prior to my job, where I had sort of heard and witnessed myself talent on set having experiences like this, either on shows I came onto after the fact or just watching, and I would watch a scene and be like, that's not lit properly, or they're not made up properly, like this is a makeup issue, this isn't, there's something going on here, and we need to get different people, we need to fix this. And so when I met, or I'll never forget, I was sitting in a meeting and I said, we were trying to figure out resources and partners that we could work with in different areas. And a colleague said, hey, I found this one called Black Beauty Roster. Now, nobody had done any research on them yet, but so I did my own digging and looked them up, and I was like, well, their site's amazing. I'm gonna reach out and give them a call. And that was sort of that. They came in for a meeting, and the presentation was amazing. And I was like, well, we have to be in business with them. And it was a long, kind of lengthy, but I'm so lucky that I worked for a group of people who were like, yeah, let's do this. Let's make a partnership. So we did, and our team it was such a wonderful marriage for us. And I feel like, for me personally, for the company, it felt like the right the right step forward, like to be allies in the space, to do the right thing for our talent, to do the right thing. I mean, look, we believe in taking a top-down approach. Like you have to make the change at the top, and also, and that's the only way we're going to see real change, right? Like changing, number one, the pipeline, changing people's understanding of what's happening on their sets, helping them understand that they have to change the hiring practices at the top so that they're hiring more people of color in their trailers. And then, I mean, changing the makeup they're bringing into the trailer, right? If you don't have the proper makeup, all of it, it's not going to change. So we sort of did a webinar for the entire, the creative teams, which also was a huge part of it. And that was the beginning of our partnership, which is now has now led into something we can talk about a little bit further. But I'll say that it's just been really, really great. I think that to know that we have sort of set an industry standard, that this is what we want and know that needs to happen in the business to make real change.
Well, two follow-ups to that I would just say is, number one, I mean, I think that illustrates really how incredibly important and valuable it is to have someone on the inside who is an advocate, who can help push, especially bigger companies, to engage, because there may be sort of a generalized idea of we want to do the right thing, but to actually turn it into specific action, that allyship is really important. And Ma, that must have been a great day when you got that phone call, I'm guessing.
Wonderful day. Woo! We were really thrilled. And just to kind of echo the points, and thank you very much, Yvette, is that a lot of this is also about credibility, right? In that we're bringing forth a solution, but when you have a large company and entity like Warner Brothers Discovery that's truly an industry leader, and they see you, right? So kind of to the point Michaela was making earlier, it's about being seen. It's about seeing the power in the work that you're doing and being able to amplify that. And we're very grateful for the opportunity to do that with Warner Brothers Discovery and a number of different companies in the industry.
That's fantastic. If we could, I'd love to shift back to Michaela for a minute and ask you about Hair Tales. Specifically, what inspired you to create it, and how does it feel to sort of be one of the people who's actually created something that's been inspired by this concept of equity in the Black beauty area?
Well, as I said earlier, our heritage and our ancestors and our history and our grandmas and our aunties and our big mamas were really who I thought about. And I love Black women. And so that's why. That's like the big why. But also in working in media and Black media, I was at Essence, Vibe, Honey, and I understood there was such a diversity of Black women. I mean, look at us. The difference in our hair, the difference in our complexion, the difference in our drip. But there is something that connects us, right, globally. And so I knew that. I knew that there was, I wanted to expand the narrow narratives around who, as a Black woman, I wanted to expand those narrow narratives, but also elevate the connectivity. And so I used hair as a metaphor, just in the same methodology that Eve Ensler used the vagina to talk about sexual violence in the vagina monologues. I used hair as a tool to talk about Black women's identity. Did lots of field research, there's lots of scholarship, there's lots of art, there's lots of culture around Black women's identity through the lens of hair. So bringing the Hair Tales to light was sort of bringing all that together. And as I said earlier, we heal through storytelling. We are storytellers. And that is, as humans, and particularly as people from African descent, storytelling is how we evolve. And so telling stories of Black women's identity through this particular lens seemed like an efficient way to affirm us, but also inform y'all what our experience is like. And if there's any advice to anyone who's trying to get to this work, center a Black woman in that leadership. center a Black woman in the solution. Because often, it's been my experience, I've done so many talks and so many, advisory councils, and they don't center, they'll bring us in, they'll give us a, cute little whatever, and then we've been doing this for years, y'all, for years, coming into corporations, coming into organizations, talking about equity. I mean, it took a horrific snuff film of Black calamity and death and chaos. And this actually, when I started making hair tales, I used to be a commentator on CNN, and from the moment Trayvon Martin was murdered to Charleston, that's all I talked about. There came a point where I was like, I have to do something that's about Black resilience, life, identity, because it was gruesome that those were the only stories that we were talking about. So we have so much life, so much resilience, so much to be inspired by. Like Oprah's story, I mean, she's from the dirt roads of Mississippi, and she became Oprah. So if she can do that, what can you do? Right? That's what I hope that others get, is that if Ayanna Pressley could stand on the floor and lose her identity and still represent her constituents in that way, in this transformational way, what could Uncle Jake do? Vote. If you can, so that's my hope for the series, and it has always come out of centering Black women, because I feel like they are our most efficient. If we're gonna make it as a I contend, if we're gonna make it as a democracy, Black women are gonna help us get out of it. Because we're from the future. We've experienced everything y'all are tripping on right now. We have had poverty, we have had adversity, we have had environmental injustice. We have lived through every kind of chaos, and we're still here. So we got a lot of things to say and share. And we have built the civil rights movement. So we have 50 years of very good consecutive organizing and policy change. So it would behoove you to center Black women in solutions, just so we can just get there. We don't have that much time. And I really want to thank SAG-AFTRA for being really out in their supporting the Crown Act, because policy matters. And what your paperwork says tells me what you think about me, not your panels. So the fact that you are attaching yourself to policy work makes it that all eyes are going to be on you. People are going to, okay, now you're going to have to do work. You can't just say, we like the Crown Act. So, and I know you know that. So, thanks.
Yes, thank you, Michaela, that's great. And we do like the Crown Act, but it's just a start, right? I mean,
yes.
It's just such a first step. When you were talking about sort of centering Black women in leadership, if we can maybe focus that in on leadership in the hair and makeup trailer, and I'd like to ask you, Maud, obviously we've had a strong statement about the partnership with Warner Brothers Discovery. Can other producers, for example, if Michaela is producing a project outside of the ambit of the Warner Brothers Discovery partnership, can she take advantage of Black Beauty roster? Can she utilize the platform? And how does it apply for the broader industry?
Yeah, so yes, right, in terms of being able to access Black Beauty roster in our BBR portal and access talent, as well as be able to access education. That's what we want. And it's very critical, right? And the reason why it's critical for especially line producers and producers to be able to access this is we recognize that you guys are very busy, right? You're very busy with all the different things that you have to do. And sometimes what we find is that hair and makeup falls very low on the totem pole. It's like an afterthought, right? And what tends to happen when it becomes an afterthought is that we don't look to better understand, are we hiring the best person for the job, right? So if we take a moment, and this actually leads into some of the institutionalized racism and unconscious bias we see. So I'm going to take it back a step further. And the reason I'm going to take a step back further is that it starts with the cosmetology license, right? So one of the big things I think a lot of people don't know, because what we sometimes have is, we'll have producers say, I don't get how this happens. I don't understand why this is an issue, is that you actually do not have to demonstrate the ability to work with textured hair in order to get your cosmetology license. So in order to be a hairstylist and get the opportunity to work in a salon, work in production, work in union productions, you actually do not have to demonstrate the ability to work with textured hair. In beauty schools, just recently in the past couple of years, they started bringing in mannequins that had textured hair. For decades, people in beauty school have just been practicing on what would be deemed sort of white or Caucasian hair, right? And if you can imagine, you can go through beauty school, not touch textured hair, get your license, not touch textured hair, right? Then you get to work in the salon, maybe not in a diverse area, and again, not be exposed to textured hair, and then get an opportunity to work in production, right? So you could go like 15 years or so without having the opportunity to work on textured hair. And what we're now seeing is that there's a lot of diversity happening in front of the camera, right? People are recognizing the importance of not just storytelling, but authentic storytelling. Telling stories that represent the communities we all live and work in, right? But what's happening is what's happening in front of the camera is not moving as fast as what's happening behind the camera. So when you're trying to tell these authentic, credible stories, do you have the right people, especially below the line that relates to hair and makeup, helping to create these looks, helping to create these characters, helping to help with these stories? And what we hear is we don't know where to find them. Solution, right? We know where you can find them, and that's what we want to make sure that the information is accessible to all producers that need to ask. So not, of course, the mighty Warner Brothers Discovery, but whether you're a large conglomerate or an indie small company, we want to empower you to be able to have these resources to make change. Because similarly, for actors, it doesn't matter if you're A-list or D-list, you deserve to have the same opportunity, you deserve to have the same treatment in your respective trailers as your white counterparts, as your top counterparts, because also this plays into your ability to do your job, right? When you sit in that chair, you should be really focused at the job at hand, memorizing your script lines, ensuring that you're mentally prepared to do the job that you're going to do. But unfortunately, what happens for a lot of talent is they sit there and they look around. Oh, do they have the right product? Do they have the right tools? I knew I should have brought my wig. I wish I brought my foundation because it's going to be this again. And they're not focused on what you've hired them to do. So that's why we want to ensure that with BBR, it's accessible to all lines of production, and they have it as a resource that they can leverage.
Yeah, I mean, it's really wrong that people have to deal with that kind of anxiety when they're trying to put on a performance. It's hard enough to do that. I mean, I'm not an actor, but I'm around them all the time. So, I mean, at home and at work. And I mean, it is a challenge. And so to any kind of additional, insensitivity like that or ignorance just puts an extra burden that shouldn't be on their shoulders. Yvette, can I ask you to just talk for a minute about what it was like for you being inside a big studio to advocate for this, sort of taking the step that you've taken in terms of Black Beauty roster, but more generally to make sure that the necessary resources are placed on hair and makeup equity. And then my compound question is, and maybe as part of that, if you can share any advice for perhaps somebody in a similar position to you at another studio or another company, how they can sort of feel confident in moving forward to achieve that change.
Sure. I mean, first I just want to say, as our working in the DEI space, which I've said is newer to me, I've been doing it for the last 2 years, and before this I was creative exec for a long time, current development, things like that. I think I'm very fortunate to be, for myself personally, being Latina, I very much I would tell you that my personally advocating for people of color has always been personally something that I'm passionate about, but it is true that until you have you reach a certain position sometimes, yes, it's harder to advocate within big companies. I do think that I was fortunate enough to work on a lot of shows where, I started asking a lot of questions. And I think that for me was a big part of it. When you ask questions, if you see something, say something, kind of is the thing, like, see something that doesn't look right, ask the question. And when I worked on a couple of shows that were what you would consider primarily Black shows. And I did start to ask questions, things I didn't know the answer to. So I started to ask and started to learn and educate myself. And it was through that educational piece for myself that I considered myself like somebody who would advocate in advance for things to go into the budget, time, really making sure that things were done properly. And it was sort of that educational piece for me that when I did end up at Warner Brothers Discovery on the DEI team, like I really was able to already know that this was something that needed to happen. And so I was in a fortunate place to be on a team where this was a priority, right? Like my job is to manage content partnerships and the partnerships that are gonna help everyone in the business, everyone at our company do their best work. And I think that this is how people do their best work when they have the resources they need to do it. That's, above and below the line. I will tell you that we firmly believe that we want to be industry leaders in this, but that doesn't mean that it's like, oh no, we should only have the resource. Like I think being industry leaders means, especially when it comes to inclusion, that we want to lead the way, but we want to lead in the space, and that means that like we want to be introducing the people to BBR, right? So we want to be making this space as inclusive as possible. Like nothing makes me happier than when I go to these sort of our weekly DEI. I mean, they're not weekly, I'm joking, but like we have sort of there is definitely sort of a clique, if you will, of other executives that work in diversity, equity, and inclusion that we sort of meet regularly and definitely discuss, best practices and like, what are you doing and how can we do it better? And I've been able to meet some of them that have said like, hey, thanks for introducing me to this group. Like now we're working with them. And I think that nothing makes me happier than hearing that. Nothing makes me happier than hearing like we met people through what you started over there. Because that means like that's like nothing makes me happier than hearing SAG-AFTRA is work, you know what I mean? Like working with them, like that's what you want. Like you want something that you sort of like, you're like, oh, hey, great. We're all working with somebody that's terrific and making the space more inclusive. That's the goal of this work. I mean, we're, and we're starting a program together. We're really excited about it. And I think like anything we can do to shift the narrative so it's not, oh, I didn't have somebody in the trailer who could do my hair, who could do my makeup. It was, I walked in that trailer and I felt great. Like for the first time in my career, I felt great. There was somebody who looked like me, who knew exactly what I needed, and it was the first time that's happened. Like those are the stories we want to hear, right? And not just that, the other thing I want to say is I want people to say they hired me for a show and it wasn't a show where that was primarily Black. It was like, I want to hear people say that they might be a Black head of hair or makeup and they got hired for a show that was it could be primarily white. And like, that's what I want to hear too, that people are getting hired because they're wonderful. Like, and I think that's the other thing, not because it has to be a primarily, person of color, show for people of color.
That's fantastic. Can I ask you, Maud, obviously part of what Black Beauty Roster's role is to help make sure that the people that are part of Black Beauty Roster are in fact qualified and capable of working with textured hair and handling makeup for diverse complexions. How do you do that? Do you have an education, training component, or what's the process at Black Beauty Roster for ensuring that?
Yeah, so we do that twofold. So as it relates to the hairstylist and makeup artist talent is we go through a vetting process in their skill set, their resume, and then they get tiered based off of their level of experience. So tiering from, as high as being able to already work with large productions, have demonstrated that piece, to, high potential, but really, again, hasn't had the access or the network to be able to break in, and making sure that they have that opportunity, to people that fall into one of our other tiers where they're a great talent, but maybe best to work with smaller productions or an assistant capacity. And then our last tier, which is what we call our beauty enthusiasts. So the skill set isn't where it needs to be, but they're quite passionate about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and being a part of that change. But equally as important is the education for the decision makers. So for your line producers, your agents, your publicists that are all in support of that talent, is really knowing, what are the intricacies at a high level of textured hair and darker complexions. Because the reality is you don't know what you don't know, right? That we can understand. If you don't have the lived experience of being a Black woman, you don't fully understand it. But what you can do is educate yourself at a high level to at least understand, what are the questions I should be asking? What should I be looking for, right? When you are looking to hire a department head, are you solely looking at the resume, or are you also taking a few extra minutes to look at the portfolio? And do those two line up? Do you see diverse representation in their portfolio as maybe you see in the resume? And we believe that, when it comes to meaningful change and really shifting, education is the foundation for that. And that's why we really push and ensure that people understand not just the vetting process of the hairstylists and makeup artists and ensure that they're qualified. Because again, we understand time is money. So we're checking that off for you. What we want to also ensure is that you have the education and the tips and tools that you need to be able to say, am I hiring the best person for this job? And the one thing that I also want to add about the BBR network is we believe representation goes both ways. This is critical for us. So the network and community are not just Black artists. They're POC and non-POC, so white, Hispanic, Latinx, Asian, all are a part of the Black Beauty roster network. Because if you see someone like, let's say Duncan, that's a hairstylist and can work with all textures, or a makeup artist that can work with all complexions, then it becomes a question of, why can't I do that? Right? I can do this as well. And if we want meaningful change, which for us, the euphoria is, hey, everybody can do every texture and everybody can work with every complexion. We have to represent that in the work and the community that we're building. So that's really important for Black Beauty roster.
Wow, thank you. Michaela, I wanted to turn to you, and actually this is going to be for Michaela and Yvette in a 1-2 punch. My first question for Michaela is, so when you arrive on set, and it turns out that you don't have qualified hair and makeup, I'm going to ask you in a minute what the production impact of that is, like how that affects production. But I'm wondering, beyond the production impact, could you maybe talk a little bit about the impact that has on the performers and others who might be there who are now stuck in this very difficult and uncomfortable situation?
Yeah, I have had the privilege of almost exclusively having a career that was in, Black media, Black women centered. Like I said, I was at Essence Magazine, I was at Honey, I was one of the founding editors of Vibe. This has been my bag, right? So I have had the privilege and the pleasure of having, major shoots where there was Black talent everywhere. And Black women, photographers, hair, makeup. And it was always baffling to me how that there wasn't this journey into television and film that was happening in Black media, right? Like Ebony is 70-something years old. Gordon Parks was the creative director there, like Andre Leon Talley was the fashion, like there's been immense talent, but there was walls, right? And what Maude pointed out is really significant, y'all. Like and this is true across all industries, you can be wildly successful and not know anything about Black folks. You can become the president of the whole ass United States and think that Frederick Douglass is a living person. That cannot happen for a woman of color anywhere. If we're sitting here, we know a whole lot about Eurocentric history, a whole lot about white folks. We have to. Our survival, like we can't be successful and not know about white cis men. You can be at the top of anything, a top of a black show, and know nothing about us. You can go to beauty school 1,500 hours, and now they've just started having an hour about, it's not in the curriculum. It's not even in the curriculum. So that's important to note. What you just spelled out is a track to success without ever understanding a big part of your community. That does not happen for people of color. That does not happen for Indigenous women. There's no way that you could be successful anywhere and not know, you know what I mean? So this piece is really critical about what people are learning, and what I have learned in these productions. I work with black hairstylists that do everybody, that do Kelly Ripa and Beyonce, right? It doesn't happen the other way around. So the question of competency really needs to start going the other way. Like when I was an editor-in-chief at Essence, I got a portfolio for a cover. I want to say it was Viola. Not one image of a black person in this person's portfolio. Thinking that they had the privilege, because they had all these other, big A-list stars. And I remember calling that agency, going, do you know who you sent this to? And they were like, yeah. So there's an arrogance and a privilege. There's some other stuff we need to break down as we're doing this, but the education piece is really important. And the advocacy around learning, because what you generally have to do is textured hair is changed first before you learn how to cut it, or it is taken out of its natural state. It's made straight, and then you can cut. Then you can, So, and now we're looking at films like Wakanda Forever, the Woman King, where hair is such a big character, and there's so much research. Like in the episode of The Hair Tales that's out now, there's a film called Daughters of the Dust. And in Daughters, that hairstylist, who's a big pioneer, she was the first expert witness in hair discrimination cases from the 80s. So we've been in this fight for a long time. It predates the Crown Act. But the deep research that she did in Madagascar and other parts of the continent to come up with these hairstyles are just like if you watch The Crown or any other sort of period piece. There's deep research. Like, we have a whole culture in which to pull from that anyone can benefit from. Anyone can benefit in looking at hair from Madagascar and get inspired, whether you're Asian or black. But the education really is not the black artists that need to be educated, it's the other folks that need to be educated.
Well, as we talked about, Exhibit A right here. Yes. So Yvette, can we move that similar question to you and sort of ask, obviously a lot of times in the industry, people are reluctant to, they want to conserve on resources. They want to cut things here, they want to cut things there. I wonder if sometimes that may be counterproductive, especially if you do that in an area where now you don't have hair and makeup who are qualified to work on the performers who are working on that project. How does that affect production? Is that a problem? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, it would definitely affect production if you don't anticipate. And I would say, I'll tell you personally, like, I've had instances, it's interesting, not so much with, I've had a lot of issues finding barbers that can work on set. Like, to me, that's always been the biggest challenge. I always had backup hair, like always. We kept a pretty good roster of hair, but barbers were always kind of a challenge. Not a lot of barbers that were union. And it was kind of a struggle when, like, somebody called out and we didn't have backup. And yeah, it affected production. I mean, it did. It just was like, delay.
People leave,
delays.
they leave the set?
Well, we would occasionally have to just hold until we could get.
I've done
somebody
that
there.
a lot in hip hop. Like back in the day in hip hop videos, you know, Fat Joe's barber ain't that like, shut it down. And someone's got to go get off the set, get out the, you know, space, get their hair done and come back. So that's money, right?
Yeah. And just to build, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was gonna, we would hold and let them go, like, you know, you'd let them go to get it done versus, because it was easier than tracking someone down because a barber, well, that's a very personal, anyway, I don't want to speak first, but yeah, it's a personal, yeah, it was difficult. I mean, people have a very specific attachment to people, and if you didn't have the person that was there that day, as somebody who witnessed like a child get a bad line and the tears, I don't ever want to experience that again in my life. And it was not like I personally, like, that kind of broke me that day, and I will, like, no. Yeah, it was, so that, I will tell you, was a production delay, and like, look, I mean, we need to train more people, and we need to get more people into the union, that is for sure.
Yeah,
that is for sure.
And just to add to that, Yvette, we received a call from a talent agency, and they were frantic for a hairstylist that could work with textured hair. And, you know, of course, like, okay, let's see what we can do to help, and really jumping in. So then they put us in touch with the line producer, and we're talking with him, and we're talking with the talent as well. And she said, you know, I'm afraid to speak up because I'm afraid to get blacklisted or be seen as being difficult, but this is just basic stuff. I need someone that can do my hair. And the hairstylist that they hired could not do textured hair. And the line producer was like, we need someone yesterday. Like, who can you send? And we're helping to sort, right? And we're making him aware of like the time, the price, and all of this. And he's getting really frustrated. And he's like, it's costing me more money. It's taking more time. I don't understand how, you know, this keeps happening. And we had to tell him, look, if you hired from the start a hairstylist that could work with all textures, you wouldn't be in the situation that you're in, and it wouldn't cost you as much. Right? Because now you're having to bring two on. So you delay the production, you're having to pay for more support as it relates to hair, and then ultimately makeup for them on that set. And he said, oh, yeah, I didn't think of that. Right? But he was moving so fast that he had to take a moment to really pause and realize that if we took just a couple more minutes at the start, in terms of hiring the department head that could work with all textures and complexions, he wouldn't be in this situation that's causing a delay that is also increasing cost. So these are important things around just being mindful early in the process and thinking this piece through.
Yeah, and so doing the right thing and is also going to work out well for you from a business perspective, I mean, on all levels. Maud, I have been told that Black Beauty Roster is about to announce a new online platform. Am I correct about that? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about how that's going to change how it's used by production or performers?
Yes, so that is in fact true. We're very excited to be launching.
Is that breaking news? Are you all hearing it here first?
Dun, dun, dun. No, I'm just joking. But what we recognize, again, is in focusing on solutions, what we keep hearing from productions is we need just an easy way to find the talent. We need an easy way as it relates to be able to post the job, see all in one place. And we said, well, why don't we create this intersection of bringing technology and professionalism and beauty together and making it really simple for talent or production to be able to find a hairstylist or makeup artist that can meet their need, and being able to have all that information centralized and located in one area. And we're very excited that we've been able to accomplish this, and we'll be launching it really at the start of this year. So if you go to our website, we actually have a wait list where you can join should you want access to the BBR portal to just make your life a little bit easier, right? What we hear right now is that it's a lot of who do you know, you're calling people, you're texting, you're emailing. Here's just a streamlined way to be able to see everything. And what we also recognize is that we all do it, right? When we think about it is we go to the people that we know and trust. And most times those people look just like us. It's not diverse. So we continue to hire, we continue to go to resources that look just like us, that maybe aren't as diverse as we like it to be, and diversity continues to be on the outside, right? And what we're trying to do with this portal is to help diversity get on the inside. If you want to be able to leverage it, if you want more resources, it's there for you. So it's no longer a question of, I don't know where to go.
That's great. Woo, yeah, we can applaud that for sure. Michaela, in the Hair Tales, their journeys and generational stories about hair, how do you see programming like this building equity in a broader sense within the entertainment industry?
So again, humans work through storytelling. Humans heal through storytelling. So the more stories we can tell, and there, you know, my original tagline, so the Hair Tale started with trauma, which I told you about, all the murder that I had to do as a CNN cultural commentator. And then it turned into, then I had a tagline, there's this story in every curl, coil, and kink. And so if that is so, there's just an endless universe of stories that we can tell that will help, that will delight us, but also help us evolve, because we just don't know enough about each other, and particularly about people who are the backbones often of our community. And I hope for your daughters that you watch this, particularly maybe Marseille, because she's so bossed up and, you know, young and fabulous, and she's just all that. But it also is a real cross-generational storytelling, and that how generations of women and Black women in Hollywood have paved the way so that a Marseille can exist, and that she could be able to be the youngest executive producer. But we have to see that you're connected to something and to a legacy. And there's just so many more. There's just so many more stories, and there's so many more stories of resilience and love and joy. I mean, and I feel like we have to find some balance in that. Like there's a lot of historical stories. That's why I love the Woman King so much. They just kicked ass, like, because we have so many stories about struggle, and our struggle in this country is very real. But I feel like there's a comfort in Hollywood with Black struggle and pain, and because that's a position that you've seen us in a lot, and so there's a kind of this underlying comfort with seeing, or at least a commonality of seeing Black people in struggle and pain and slavery and murder and chaos and calamity. But Black joy and resilience and Black women's internal lives, our memories, our complexity, the layers, this is new territory. You know, we have dynamic imagination. We have very complex interior lives. And when we've seen it in literature, we haven't seen it on the screen. So I'm hopeful that something like the Hair Tales, which is kind of an easy way to get into us, that we can start to have more complex storytelling around particularly Black women's identity in our interior lives. And just some fun, because we're fly. Like, I want to look at this, right? Like, the hairstyles alone are just so, like, they're art. They're fantastic. And I hope for your daughters that they not only see themselves, but they get inspired, and there's a community around them. It's not about one hairstylist, even though you will see your hairstylist like your gynecologist. Like, when you're talking about barber, like, this is a relationship. Yeah. And but also there's a community of when you go in that salon and you sit and you hear the aunties talking, and it's the hair salon, Black hair salon is the most democratic place in the world. You could be sitting next to a governor, a Muslim, an atheist, evangelist. Somebody could have an ankle bracelet on, and we all in the same place getting our hair did. And we're in community, right? And when you're in community, you start to solve problems. So you're creating a digital community, but it's like a hair salon, right? Like, okay, we're here, what we need, what's going on? You need some socks, you need the thing, so-and-so got to get to college. Like, that's what we do in those spaces. And so to create them in this, modern way, so everyone can benefit. So That was a long answer to that.
No, it was a great answer. Thank you. So I just have a couple more questions, but I wanted to ask Yvette, we are here at AFM, and so obviously you've talked about your experience at a big studio. What advice would you have for independent producers who might be looking to help create more equity in this space? And do you have any tips for them?
Well, I did my own very small movie, only once, but yes. Oh, sorry. I said I did my own very small movie only once, but I did. I mean, I think it's still the same work applies. Like, I think I can say there are, number one, all levels of people that you can find on Black Beauty roster. I just want to say that for independent movies to the big projects. But I think it's still about finding the right fit for your project. There are still people people are out there looking for the experience too. So depending on what it is that you're making, I will just tell you can I say this? We're about to launch a program together for department heads, but in the course of the meeting for a department head program, we met so many people. I can't tell you how many people we met from around the country who were working in small markets, from Savannah, Georgia to Nova Scotia, so Canada. So we met people from everywhere, and they're really out there, like, just trying to learn, right? They're taking jobs and really trying to learn the business. And I think that's and they're wanting to work on these kinds on projects, the smaller independent movies to the big ones. So I would offer that as a piece of advice. Like, they're the people that are the most passionate and eager to get in on the ground floor, and they're the people that we want to be department heads one day, frankly, because they've been there from the get-go.
Oh, that's the perfect segue into the question I wanted to ask Maude, which is, I know it's a big question, but how do we actually get more Black heads of hair and makeup in the trailers?
Yeah, great question. There are a few things that I want to say on that, and the first one I want to say is tokenism is not the answer. And this is very important, because what tends to happen is people will say, okay, Natalie, I'm gonna make you department head. But are you setting Natalie up for success or failure? Does she have the skill set in terms of understanding what it means to be a department head, right? From managing a budget, picking your team, breaking down skill set. It's breaking down script. It's not just about having the skill set, but it's being able to ensure that you are a true leader. Because what happens is that if Natalie's not set up for success, and she's just selected, and she doesn't do a good job, and it's like, all right, well, we tried. We're gonna go back to what we've been doing because we tried and it didn't work. And the reality is that you didn't actually set her up for success, you set her up for failure. So that's why the department head program that Yvette's talking about is so critical, because when we hear about the importance of diversity in the trailer, usually the first response is, we need more diversity hired, through the union or different things like that. And I think that's a fair point. But what I challenge is, that's great, but if you don't have diverse department heads, what's the point? Because they're not gonna get hired, right? And I think that's one of the really important pieces, is that we have to groom the next level of leadership and ensure that the next level of leadership looks more like the communities that we live in and represent. So that way we have more diverse hair and makeup artists within the trailers. That way, talent walks in confidently and knows that they have people that care about them. Because when they sit in that chair and they don't feel that they have the support for hair or makeup, they feel like you don't care. And what we know is that that's not the truth. We know that productions and brands do care. So what we want to try and do is put those pieces together. So I will say that avoiding tokenism is critical when you're trying to hire more Black department heads. I think it's really important to have the education and training, and to also ensure that they're qualified, because that's one of the other pieces as well. That's why the training is so important, is we want to take away the excuse of, well, I don't know if Maude's ready for this. Well, Maude's just gone through this program. She's had industry leaders take her through this program, vet her, take her through all these different pieces and said, okay, yeah, Maud is actually ready. Because I think that also gives production the confidence to say, okay, let's do this. And that's why I'm really excited about this program. That's how I believe we'll have more diverse department heads and truly represent what we're seeing in front of the camera, behind the camera, and also the communities we live in.
Can I ask her a question?
Yeah, of course, go ahead.
Because this is so compelling, because what you laid out is this is really critical, that that some people are being projected into spaces that they have not been trained for, because for institutionally, generationally, they have been cut out of it. So it is not, so, and this is kind of maybe for you too, Yvette, like, there has to be some catch up that the industry invests in, because you may have all the talent, but if you don't know how to negotiate the industry, the people, the institution, the culture, you can't be, you can be wildly successful. I mean, creative and able to, talented and all that stuff. But if you don't know, then it's like being thrown into the wolves. And it's what you said earlier, this is not, we didn't create this problem. We didn't create racism. We didn't create not having generations of hairstylists in our family or your friends or the good boys and girls club. Like, we are the first in a lot of places. And so those places, those institutions have to have some kind of responsibility for preparing them, and not framing it that you're not qualified, framing it like we're catching up for some work we never did to help you be where you should have been, where your children should have been, right? And so there is a sort of mentor or leadership program to get the talent ready for the culture of the industry?
Well, yes, and also the management, right? Because it's really, it's very different from just doing, to your point, having the skill set, just doing hair and makeup. It's literally managing people. It's creating budgets. It's breaking down scripts. So all these different elements go into that, because we believe, again, as we're all working towards solution of bringing more diversity, inclusion, and equity, we have to look at it from all fronts. And we believe a program like this is a great way of looking at bringing a solution, because there isn't one answer.
Well, in just a minute, we're going to take some questions from the audience. So people in the audience, get your questions ready. They're going to come around with mics. But as they're getting ready to do that, I just want to go through our panel and say, what would you, if you had one key takeaway you'd want to make sure that people who are here or people who are watching a video of this might walk away from this time together, what would that be? And Yvette, why don't I start with you and work my way down the row?
If you're in a position like me, I think that to know that you do have the opportunity to make change, ask the questions, listen, and know that there is you may not be able to start a program, you may not be able to make these key partnerships, but know that they are out there. There are organizations like this that are doing the work that you can work with. There are opportunities in your in the work that you're doing, and if you know that you can really make a difference in a small way, in a big way, on your sets, in your shows, and if you're on the other side of the camera, make sure you're asking the questions and saying like, hey, is there going to be this for me on the set that I'm walking into? If this is something that you need, and ask for it, you should ask for it.
I love that point that you made it earlier and again now, which is, asking questions can be very powerful. Like making statements is powerful too, but sometimes asking the right questions can be very important. Maud?
I would say be an ally and be an amplifier, right? Because what we recognize is that a lot of people don't speak up because of fear of retaliation. So if you're in a position where you can help by being an ally, by being an amplifier, by helping to give voice to someone that feels voiceless, do it, utilize it. And we all don't know all the answers, right? But knowing that education is out there, and that if you're willing to learn, if you know better, you do better. And if there's a willingness, there's an opportunity, and we're here to help. So I'm really hoping that from today, we can all be amplifiers and allies and really help to make a difference for more diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Fantastic, thank you. Michaela, bring us home.
Well, if you're in one of the states where the Crown Act isn't passed. It's in 19 states now. Get involved, pass the Crown, help us make it a federal. So there's that. And let Black women lead. And watch the hair tails with others, and like have some cocktails and kiki, but have some real conversation about probably a lot of things that you didn't know. I mean, there's one part of the show where you're actually in a salon, and to me that's like the soul of the show, because that's where real women have these very real conversations about their lives and their identity. And so I just hope this brings us a little bit closer together and closer to solutions, because we have a lot of work to do as a culture, as a country, as a community of humans. And I just bet on Black women because, just history. Like, I got, the receipts, we're here. We've done a lot. We've survived. So, yeah.
I mean, obviously, there are people at the top of the industry who have the power individually to dictate what is going to be done, but this is really a human right issue, and that's
Yes.
why, whether it's through legislation like the Crown Act, whether it's through contracts negotiated by unions like SAG-AFTRA, to make sure that everybody has the right to be treated with that respect and dignity, not just people who have their own individual bargaining power to achieve it. That's really the ultimate goal, I think. We are completely out of time, so I just have to say thank you so much. This has been an amazing panel. Thank you, Yvette Urbina. Thank you, Maud Okra, and thank you, Michaela Angela Davis. You are all amazing advocates, and this has been just a wonderful discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Duncan.
Thank you, Duncan.